Let's do this. The Cult of Hockey podcast by the faithful and for the faithful. I'm David Staples of the Edmonton Journal, and I'm here today with Bruce McCurdy. Welcome, Bruce.
Hey, David. How are you doing?
Good. And losing my voice again here for a second now.
All these podcasts, running out of voice.
All right, Bruce. We're here today to talk. We're not going to do the keep, hold, or fold on Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl.
Keep.
Or Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. I guess you could do it with Ryan Nugent-Hopkins.
You could.
I think you can make an argument. It's one of those horrible arguments that are made of
that everybody hates.
Well, the value is high arguments, and everybody hates because come on. If we're honest, how many NHL teams really do that ever? You could find examples probably on one hand of the old pump and dump, like where someone actually builds up the value and moves them, but it hardly ever happens. And I think actually you can make a real argument. This is the time to move RNH. But we're not going to get into that. We're not going to do that.
Well, we would not be popular with Oilers fans because the Nuge is about as popular as it gets around here. I mean, I've been hearing so many people that just say it's a non-starter with me trade. Yeah. Nuge. It almost wouldn't matter what they got back for him, which I mean.
Well, what if you got the top puck-moving right-shot D-man that you've been looking for forever? What if you got Tyson Barrie? So that's what I'd be talking about. And so that's the only. So I guess we weren't going to do this, but I've done it.
Okay.
So he's a hold for me. And if you got the right puck-moving, right shot, power play quarterback, top 4 D-man, yeah, I would do it. So there you have it. That's my horrible, honest to God opinion on the matter.
Okay.
Because I think he had a really great season offensively. I think he's a good defensive player, not a great defensive player. I don't think he's a driver of his own line. He's a good, very good complementary player on a first or second line. Okay. But he's not moving. He's going to be with the Oilers. There's no way they're moving him, I don't think. Bruce, how have the Oilers been using these 3 players? Are they using them correctly? We're going to talk about usage. Do they use them correctly? What's the best way to use them?
Best way to use them is to find him some freaking teammates that can play with him. That's my cutting edge opinion.
Like Tyson Barrie?
They used him so much last year because they didn't have very many options. These 3 guys were by such a huge margin, the 3 best forwards on the team, that they had to pile them over the boards as much as possible. To the degree that Connor McDavid led all NHL forwards in average ice time per game, with Leon Draisaitl second. That Leon Draisaitl led the NHL in total ice time because he played all 82 games and McDavid missed a couple to illness and a couple more to suspension. And even Nuge, as mostly playing on a different line at the center position, he was in the top 25 in the league, one of only 26 forwards to average 20 minutes a night. So the Oilers had 3 out of 26, right, in the entire league, who played 20 minutes a night playing up front. And that's because the coaches had so few other options that they had to play, and frankly, I think overplay these guys to their detriment.
I don't know about that. I think they can handle a lot of ice time, but I don't like. I've pounded on like breaking up McDavid and Draisaitl, and clearly it worked having them together this year. They didn't have any other alternatives really. They didn't have enough wingers. I really did like the McDavid RNH Tyrati line. I wish Tyrati had remained healthy. I think that line could have done something this year, and I think it would have been really great for the team. I don't know who they would have played with Draisaitl though, like honestly. So Draisaitl, he wants to score. He wants to play with a good player. So pretty hard to keep him and McDavid off the same line this year. They've got to find, like you say, Bruce, they've got to find some wingers and some defensemen who can combine with these guys in the offensive zone better than the Oilers have. They really didn't have any D-men who worked particularly well in the offensive end. You put the puck back to the point, McDavid or Draisaitl. It's not like there's a moment, there's going to be a dangerous shot or there's going to be a tricky pass to free up one of these players down low. It's like, no, they might keep it in. Best you're going to do is put it back to the corner. And
Yeah.
It's just starting to drive me crazy. Like the lack of offensive ability of the Oilers defensemen, including Oscar Klefbom and Darnell Nurse in the offensive zone. It is a huge problem on the Oilers. So as much as they need wingers, they've got to change out. I think they really need to change out two of the D-men. And I would say Chris Russell and Matt Benning are at the top of my list. Even though Benning's got the best, he was the best shot, most likely to get the shot on net in that particular situation. But his puck moving is otherwise mediocre. So I just want to see some better Caleb Jones, maybe Joel Persson in there this year, and Andre Sekera in there this year. And what they can find on the wing is another question. I mean, it doesn't look like Puljujärvi's going to be here. Like, who are they going to get?
Yeah.
What are they going to do?
Yeah, well, that's the question. I mean, when we talked about Sam Gagner, I mean, he's a depth forward, but if you look at the stats and assume that what he did in 25 games here is representative of the player, he was the fourth best offensive forward that Edmonton had in terms of scoring points, in terms of shots on net, and I mean, Sam Gagner, you've got to have a couple of layers of players, I would suggest, between him and the top of your lineup at this stage. But they just had, the wings that they did have were not real creative players. Alex Chiasson and Zach Kassian, they scored a few goals by being on the ice with the right players, but I'm not sure that they created a whole lot. And the Oilers, just as they currently stand on defense or the wing, they don't have many creative players. That what they do have is the big three, and this is the core of the team that we're talking about in this podcast. Nice to have those three guys.
They can't count on Lucic. Hopefully, they won't be counting on him. Like they going into last year, Lucic was pegged in on the second line.
Oh yeah,
Tobias Reeder was the other guy. Both monumental flops, and Ratty and Nugent-Hopkins on the top lines. I would bring back Ty Ratty personally. I don't think he will be back.
I don't mind him. I don't think he'd be a bad idea as a depth signing. But the fact is, last year that the depth signings that they did make, combined with the young guys that they expected to take a step forward, Puljujärvi that you mentioned and Kailer Yamamoto, it just hasn't clicked for none of those best laid plans actually seem to work out in real life.
But one plan did work, Bruce. It was to give Tyler Benson and Cooper Marody a year in the AHL. Both of them excelled at the AHL level, point-of-game players. Marody was, and Benson was close. They might get a top six winger out of those two guys. One of those two guys might break through this year on your second line. And I would hope to see, at least for starting the year, one of them on the third line, and hopefully he can work his way up. So we have Kassian, I guess, as a candidate. Who ended up on McDavid's line. So that's four guys. So let's say they add Kassian to McDavid, Nugent-Hopkins, and Draisaitl. Kassian, Benson, and then someone that they sign is your other guy. And
with the 50 cents of cap space that they've got.
It's likely not Yamamoto or Marody. Could be, but that would be expecting a lot. So it's probably not Puljujärvi. So they got to find a top six winger. Well, it could be this. They signed what's his noodle, the Swedish winger,
Nygaard,
Joakim Nygaard. Fast, but he sounds like a third line winger. So they got to find someone.
Yeah,
we haven't mentioned the name Alex Chiasson yet.
Right.
He's a really mediocre even strength scorer.
Well, yeah, I don't think the time that he spent on the first line, I didn't think the first line was that effective.
No.
And the time that Zach Kassian spent on the first line, which was most of the second half of the season, they were a very productive offensive line, but defensively they were a disaster. And here's my hidden stat for you on Connor McDavid. And this is not an opinion on McDavid. This is a stat. But in the last half of the season, according to Natural Stat Trick, I looked at all the players that played at least 300 minutes in the 5-on-5 play in the second half of the season. 529 NHL players, And of them, Connor McDavid was 529th and last in the NHL with the worst goals against per 60 of any player in the league. 4.24 goals against, 4.24 goals against per 60. Now, some of that is incidental, some of that is teammates, some of that certainly is goaltending. Some of it is just, not getting the save or not having the percentages on their side. But the fact is they scored 3.5 goals per 60, which is great, but they gave up 4.25 goals per 60. So scoring is great, but what the game is really about is outscoring. And this right now is an issue. And that's, if I'm Dave Tippett, that's a problem that I look at right away, is trying to figure out what do we do about that? Because it doesn't matter, if you're scoring 4 and giving up 5 or whatever, it's not a winning proposition.
McDavid has some growth to do as a defensive hockey player. I think that's my comment about the player. And I know that's not a popular thing to say, but he needs a little bit of work on recognizing the right player to cover in the slot, making defensive reads. This is not easy. It's a really difficult.
Yeah, it's not an issue. I don't think of
it's
laziness
of effort
or effort. It's an issue of, as you say, recognition, and also I think it's just a matter of having all this offensive pressure heaped on these guys. Like, if you don't score, we're not going to score. So you better score, and you better hope your goalie makes a save when the puck goes the other way. And certainly he scored. I mean, McDavid last year. Here's my other secret stat. Not so secret, probably. He scored 116 points, and the Oilers scored 229 goals. So he literally was involved in more than half of Edmonton's goals on the season.
And that's officially, Bruce. I haven't tallied up how many goals he was involved in where he made the fourth, the third, fourth, or fifth assist.
Right.
He's probably involved in about 130 of the goals, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I had a few more. Anyway, he was in a more than half. And now I don't have the computing chops to let a computer figure it out for me, but I went back sort of manually and looked at hot shot scores. And the last guy I could find who was in on half of his team's goals was Jaromir Jagr in 1998-99. He had 127 points out of 248 goals for Pittsburgh. So he was around 52%. Wow. And, you're talking about the creme de la creme. When you're talking about guys like Jaromir Jagr and Connor McDavid as offensive players. The issue is not offensive. The issue is that you don't have enough offensive players that are piling too much of this expectation on these two guys even.
So where we end up with, there's no, the right question isn't to ask about usage. The right question to ask is about, can they finally get some line mates for these guys?
Yeah.
And if they do, then they have more options and they can split them up or use them in different combinations. And maybe that's going to work. But what a nightmare to go into the season yet again. And so I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know, there's all these names floating around, Brett Connolly, but it's casting a shadow over that is this incredibly stupid contract that the Flyers gave Kevin Hayes, 7 years at $7.1 million. What is Brett Connolly thinking now? What is Joachim, what's his name, or Jonas Donskoy thinking? What is Gustav Nyquist thinking? The Oilers can't afford a $5 or $6 million a year winger. It's not going to happen.
Guess whose name is now on the top of everybody's comparables list?
Connolly?
Right? No, Hayes.
Oh yeah, Hayes.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, if Hayes did this and got $7 million, and I did this, and I should get $8 million or $6 million or what have you, right? But either way, it's a very high bar. So, and I mean, two other issues. I mean, with the Kassian, McDavid, Draisaitl line, and we hammered on this throughout our podcasts throughout the year of Kassian's defensive inability to take away the lanes and the passing lanes and penalty kill and the shooting lanes and so on. And the other one that I know you were strong on throughout the year was the two centers in the defensive zone model, where both McDavid and Draisaitl are the defense are F1 and F2 or whatever you want to call them, but not necessarily got their signals sorted out as to who's taking what guy, who's the center in this situation, and just too many sort of lapses where there was an easy man left open for tap in or a gold plated scoring chance. So not really for all that they have wonderful scoring talent, not really the kind of dominant two-way line that you'd love to have. There's no Yari Curry on that line. Let's put it that way.
And I think Draisaitl has the makings of a really good defensive center. And I think, Bruce, if you went and looked at the replays, you'd find, I bet you, 10 goals, maybe in the last half of the year, where either McDavid or Draisaitl thought they were playing center or wing or didn't know what he was playing, and the guy crept into the slot and scored. It was constant.
Yeah, it was very common.
And this is the problem with moving them around constantly. I think maybe if you just stuck with them together on the same line and said, okay, McDavid, you're the wing, you're the guy, we're going to break you out, and Draisaitl's going to advance the puck, which is, I think, the roles that they should have, that they're best at. Now, McDavid probably has to be the center. Like, there is a bit of a screw up. It's not working when they're in their own zone, as you're pointing out here. I mean, that stat, I think, is really says a lot. And we track mistakes on scoring chances against. McDavid's went up this past year a lot. And,
he had the highest rate of centers on the Oilers, and by your system that you've made up, you have to sort them by position.
That's right. And then Draisaitl was next. They were way ahead of Strome and Nugent-Hopkins and Cave. So,
and some of it's the cost of doing business, and sometimes you say, well, damn it, your goalie needs to stop one of those. And
but this is just takes on grade A chances. This isn't how many they're letting in.
Yes,
this is the actual mistakes they're making, the rate of, and there's no, they shouldn't, the rate shouldn't have been that high. They shouldn't be that high. So there's a problem there that needs solving, and it's one of the things that will be up to Tippett. So we have, again, usage isn't the issue. Well, this is a usage issue, because I think putting them together on the same line or mixing them around back and forth, that doesn't work. It's like, okay, make up your minds, play them one or the other, because it's not working defensively to constantly shift them. I think that is the clear indication we're getting from the numbers. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that some kind of systematic play, that's something that the new coaching staff is going to need to work on. And I do think that all that ice time, all game after game after game, I do think those guys retired at the end of games oftentimes. And I know I read tons and tons of criticism of Draisaitl being lazy, and the guy's playing like 24 minutes a night 3 times in 4 days or something. Well, at that rate, you have to pick your spots a little bit. I made this point during the season frequently that, you have your 28 or 30 minute a game defenseman like Drew Doughty or Ryan Suter. And it's not like those guys are busting their ass for the entire game. It's they're picking their spots and so on. Well, that's a lot easier to do at defense as a forward. And the forward can look bad when he's not like racing around on his whole shift. But when the guy's playing 24 minutes, it's, it becomes a very difficult challenge. So
the center is always on the go. Centers are always on the go.
Wouldn't mind seeing him cut a minute or two off of those ice time. And you know what? Even if it takes a few points off the register for those guys, if they become more of an outscoring line, that's going to have to be the goal.
So Leon Draisaitl, lazy and overpaid.
Yeah. That contract's looking mighty fine at this point, especially the 8-year aspect that has 6 years still to run.
It's looking like Grand Theft Superstar, Bruce.
I read that. I thought that was a good line from you. I read that. Leon, now just centering on Leon for a minute, he scored 50 goals this year and 55 assists for 105 points. He was the first NHLer to score 50 and 50 in the same season since Evgeny Malkin in 2011-12. 7 years since someone has done that. So he wasn't just the only guy. I keep reading. He's the only guy in the league to get 50 and 50 this year. I'm going to see the first guy in the league in a long time to do that. And that's pretty impressive, especially how he surged as a goal scorer. And you want to talk about a lazy player? How much time has that guy spent working on his shot, do you suppose? His release, his one-timer that kept overpowering NHL goalies and picking corners. I'm thinking that's a hard-working player that put a lot of effort into that. But I don't attend practice, so maybe it's just his gift and he's just learning how to do it. But I expect that Did you ever see him as a 50-goal scorer?
Oh yeah.
2 years ago, 3 years ago? Okay. I saw him as a 70-assist guy,
Yeah,
potentially.
no, I thought he might get 30 goals, 35.
Yeah, I thought he might get 35 and 70 if he was going to get 105 points, not 50 goals. But
All righty, Bruce. Let's leave it there.
I got one more magic stat, and this involves all three of the guys.
Okay.
This is McDavid, Draisaitl, Nugent-Hopkins. Among the three of them, scored 119 of Edmonton's 229 goals. They scored over half of Edmonton's goals. Three players, over half of the goals. And again, I poured through the sieve that passes for my brain, and I went through some of the logs, and I found a team that did this. This was the Los Angeles Kings of 1979-80 with the famous Triple Crown line. And among the three of them, they scored 146 of the Kings' 290 goals. So they literally, one line, they were a full line. They scored half of the team's goals. And that team badly missed the playoffs and got clobbered.
That was also a bad team. Yeah.
It was a bad team. And the next year, actually, the Triple Crown line scored more goals than that, but the whole team scored way more. So they were no longer at the 50% mark. And that team in 80-81 was good. So that's the ideal for the Oilers, is do whatever the Kings did in the summer of 1980. Draft Barry Murphy. That'd be a good place to start.
Thanks, Bruce. Thanks for talking.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everyone.
And in the meantime, and in between times, this has been another edition of the Cult of Hockey podcast.